Investigation. I'm joined by Betsy Woodruff, politics reporter for the Daily Beast, and then V. Jamali, former double agent who infiltrated Russian intelligence for the FBI. And Betsy, what's remarkable about this sort of bizarro world we've entered into is the Republican Party, which has done so much rhetorically to bend over backwards to put itself on the side of law enforcement, no matter what law enforcement has done. That we Blue Lives Matter, we support cops, we support law enforcement, even in the wake of what seems like pretty obvious and serious law enforcement misconduct at the local level, is now running a kind of en masse campaign against federal law enforcement right in front of the nation's eyes.
It's really astonishing, and the timing of the president's tweets criticizing the FBI are uniquely astounding. The reason is that just a few days before Christmas, the FBI announced, and the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, chimed in, supporting and amplifying this announcement, that the FBI had arrested a man who allegedly sympathized with ISIS and was planning a Christmas Day terrorism attack in San Francisco. That was a huge announcement. It generated national news. It was the banner on the Drudge Report. But President Trump was completely silent about this, completely silent about the fact that his top law enforcement agency, that those guys did their jobs, that they potentially stopped a slaughter. It was maybe the only time I can think of when there's been major terrorism-related news and the president has been silent. And instead of saying, look at the great job our boys are doing, rah, 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 let's go get ISIS, instead of that, the president's tweeting about Jim Baker and Andy McCabe and the dossier and the Clinton email investigation. It's really extraordinary the lengths to which Republicans in this administration have gone to sort of cover their eyes and plug their ears when FBI agents do their jobs and actually make us safer.
Naveed, having worked at the FBI, I mean, what do you think? You take a step back and think of what is being essentially sold right now by the president and his allies, which is that the FBI amounts to essentially a kind of like subversive, left sympathetic fifth column. Like, how does that square with your experience in the Bureau?
It's crazy. I mean, it's just, look, it's almost the equivalent of being a public defender. You don't have to believe in your client. You can still give them, a good defense. Right. I mean, this is the same thing. And I got to tell you, talking to line agents, not like Frank, who is, at the top of the rung here, but line agents who are actually doing this stuff, it's very much what Betsy is saying, is that they look at this and say, I mean, I had a friend who's still a counterintelligence officer say to me, man, I'm really glad when the call came to join the Mueller probe that I said no, because look where I would be. I mean, they're watching their bosses being dragged through the mud. At the end of the day, Chris,
wait a second. That's an interesting detail. I want to focus on that because that suggests. I mean, Frank's point was a little bit that this is the rooster, taking credit for the sun coming up, right? That this stuff is going to happen and the president's trying to take credit for it. But what I hear from you there is that actually there is some kind of effect. People understand that if you join the probe, all of a sudden your face, anonymous line agent, might be on the running on Trump TV all day.
That's right. And look, it's not just the people who are there now, right? McCabe is retiring. He's had a 20-plus year career. We have to keep recruiting young people. And there needs to be a constant pool of people willing to stand up and take on this job. And if they look at this and they sort of see the, the high-level people being sullied, having their careers ended for doing their job, I think it's going to have a chilling effect. And the only people who are winning, Chris, honestly, it's Vladimir Putin. The only ones that are benefiting from having a department, having the FBI, having counterintelligence in disarray, our adversaries. There's no one else.
Betsy, point of doing the job that Naveed just mentioned, you have a new piece that I'm just looking at right now, just published, and the headline of it, which is intriguing, is Robert Mueller may indict Paul Manafort again. What's that about?
Having had conversations with numerous former Justice Department officials and legal experts over the last few days, one thing that I keep hearing when I ask folks what's the most obvious thing they expect to happen next year is folks expect for Mueller to hand down what's called a superseding indictment. It's when a prosecutor like Bob Mueller essentially says, here's a new indictment that includes everything from the previous one, but also tacks on some additional charges, additional detail, additional problems for the person who's being charged. In this case, the reason so many folks, including a former tax division prosecutor at Maine Justice, a high-level white-collar criminal defense attorney, a former IRS criminal investigator, the reason all these folks are telling me this is because in the initial Manafort indictment, there was a lot of detail that didn't actually amplify or support the specific charges, particularly on tax questions. There was a lot of detail about dicey financial dealings that Manafort and Rick Gates were involved in, about questionable absences of financial information on tax forms that indicates Mueller might have enough evidence to bring additional charges against Manafort. That could put more pressure not just on Manafort, but also on Rick Gates, who my sources believe has the biggest potential to be additional cooperating witness to Mueller.
Naveed, if things do escalate, and I think everyone is sort of white-knuckling right now about what's happening in 2018, frankly, because it feels like we're on a path that's scary in certain ways. Do you think the department and the FBI are prepared for what that might look like?
Oh, that's really the $64,000 question. I think the answer is yes. I think that when people over the last few weeks we've heard Mueller might get fired, right? I think it's important to understand that the investigation, while Mueller is leading it, the is bigger than one woman or one man. And I think that no matter what happens, no matter who leads the investigation, who comes and goes, who retires, who stays, I think the investigation will go forward. There will be a culminating point. There will be something that this leads towards, whether that's criminal indictment, whether it's criminal prosecutions. I think the smart money is to say yes, although we don't know the specifics, but it is going to end. It's going to go somewhere. And I think that that's going to be the interesting test to, frankly, our democracy.
We should note in the past it was an FBI agent named Mark Felt, who was enraged by the president's treatment of the Bureau that brought down Richard Nixon